Hi everyone, it's Fiona here from fionamarks.com, and I'm back with another video in our series of analysing a chart by house. And this chart that we're looking at is based on Prince Harry's birth time, and today we're going to look at the third house. So let's share the screen and have a look at what is in the blog. So as you know, each of these chapters of Harry's chart are already up on the blog, but we're interested today in the third house. And this, the little intro says, see how the strain of a debilitated third lord Jupiter, ruling personal ambitions, located in the first house of life path, has created difficulties for Prince Harry, led to Megxit, and created the Invictus Games. So quite a lot coming together in this third house. Let's click and have a look at the article. So before we get started, we might want to also just remind you of his chart. So this is Prince Harry's birth time chart. And as you can notice, he's a Capricorn ascendant. And we've already spoken about the first house and the second house, both ruled by Saturn. But today we're making our first foray out of Saturn's clutches into Pisces, which is the third house for this chart. But of course, we didn't get too far away from Saturn because the third lord is actually located in the first house of Capricorn, which of course belongs to Saturn. So we've got a few things bringing us back to Saturn energy there. We can just check, as we discussed, that Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn, so the lord of the third house, and it's Mritra, meaning that the karma for this person has mostly played out. And the lord is, Jupiter is Shushupti, meaning asleep. So not that able to respond to the karma that's coming up in front. Okay, so that was a reminder of Prince Harry's birth time chart. Now, let's get back to where we were, the third house. So why don't we remind ourselves of the third house? And I remember when I was learning houses in the second semester of the first year, I remember being like, the third house, that seems like a whole rag bag full of things that just don't go together, because it can represent peers and younger siblings. And it shows courage, hobbies, and skills. And I remember asking, we had a kind of, at the end of the year, some kind of online retreat, get together, something, and asking someone, what's with this third house? I don't understand. And the explanation they shared was just wonderful around that it is through our siblings, those people that we jostle with in our little pack, that we become courageous because we're fighting for the same resources, and we learn things from those people. We build our skills from rubbing up against all these other little puppies in our litter, or our brothers and sisters, or our peers. So that brought it together really nicely for me. The third house of this chart, however, has only one indicator for prosperity, while it has 6 for annihilation, including Rashi aspects from the malefic planets, the Sun and Mars. And you can see that if you've already watched the video about the little spreadsheet I do when I'm writing these essays. I just try to break down all of these indicators so that I've got some distance from it and I can kind of zoom out. I clump them into these 3 categories of ease, movement, and discomfort. And we can see that there's a lot of there's not a lot of support for ease in this third house. And we know that because we've got a debilitated lord, we've got the Mrita, the lord is Mrita, the lord is Shushupti. It's getting these Rashi aspects, and it's not aspecting its own house. So lots of things stacking against it there, as well as you can look at all these other factors too. So let's see how this has played out in his personal life. So he doesn't actually have any younger siblings. He has had a military career. And of course, that involves courage, adventure, and peers. You know, that whole brothers in arms thing of being in the military. He's played quite competitively or at quite high levels, rugby and polo. So this continuing this theme of athleticism and courage. He is the driving force behind the Invictus Games, which champions the athleticism of wounded service personnel. And he's also worked with charities to promote sport in schools and communities throughout the world. And if you click on that link, it brings you to this page. And, you know, it's amazing what you find when you do research for these essays, because let's look at this little snapshot here. Prince Harry believes that sport has the power to change lives for the better. He has championed access to sport for children and young people to give them confidence and valuable life skills. He's also championed the value of sport in helping wounded servicemen become mentally and physically stronger as they recover from injury through his work with Invictus. So, how can you just see how that pulls in lots of these third house, first house themes? Let's just go over this first sentence. Believes that sport, a third house thing and a Jupiter thing, which we'll get to, has the power to change lives, which is the first house, change the direction of his life. He's championed access to sport for children and young people. And isn't that a great analogy or a great way of expressing peers and younger siblings? It's already right there. And then he's championed the value of sport for helping wounded service people. So once again, this idea of sport and athleticism being wrapped up in his life path, the first house. So why don't we take a look at which sign it's in? And it is in the third house. So for all Capricorn ascendants, the sign of their third house is Pisces. Yes, Pisces is feminine and it's a water sign. It's the natural 12th sign of the zodiac, and its symbolism relates to transcending and dissolution. It is a mutable sign and it's associated with moksha. Harry's creation of the Invictus Games demonstrates the Pisces influence on his third house. Throughout his career, he's used sport to inspire hope. And we just saw that on his own royal page. So it's linking that Jupiter Piscean quality of hope with sport and greatness in those less fortunate. Traditionally, for a soldier, injury is synonymous with death, the 12th sign, because there is no role for a wounded soldier in the army or in the military. And Harry's Invictus Games has become a beacon of hope for military personnel in this situation. In the Yavana Jataka, it describes Pisces as filled with auspicious places of gods and pilgrimages. And that's right up the top there. I don't know whether you can, you can see, trying to draw this idea of the stairs leading up to a pilgrimage there. And with the Invictus Games, he's created a Shangri-La destination for wounded surface personnel so that they can look to for hope and strive to attain. It's something, like a beacon of hope. And then it's just really interesting to note that in Wikipedia, Invictus, it explains Invictus was a description of the Roman god Jupiter, which is the owner of the sign as Pisces. So even choosing this name has this link to Jupiter already. And also Invictus was a Roman god that was associated with Sun and Mars. And we saw in the beginning those Rashi aspects. Let's go back. That this Pisces field where all of this is taking place is receiving Rashi aspects from Mars and from the Sun. So it ties in really nicely with Invictus, bringing in these Greek gods and their associated planets. So let's talk directly now about Jupiter. It's ruling the third house for all Capricorn ascendants. Jupiter is gentle, expansive, and optimistic, and it's an indicator of grace, forgiveness, creativity, children, games, and good cheer. It's a benefic and it's sattvic, which means it's inspiring, brings light. In this chart, we already know Jupiter is debilitated. However, it does have Shadbala. It's got 124% of Shadbala, but no Ayana Bala. And we talked about this in the blog on the first house, that Ayana Bala is what helps a person, Jupiter, strong in Ayana Bala, helps a person see the big context that makes conflict worthwhile. The classic Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is explaining to Arjuna why we go into battle. So we need that really big Jupiter to understand that sometimes conflict and suffering is the right path, and that we have to face our dharma. So that is what Jupiter is good for if it's strong in Ayana Bala. But in this case, no, that would mean that it's hard to see the point of suffering for this person, they themselves. And in others, yes, they don't want to see anybody go through any suffering. Jupiter is, however, being delighted by the sun and moon to more than its starvation from Mercury and Jupiter. And although it is debilitated in all the first of 4 Vargas, Jupiter ends up being exalted in the D7. And that is the Varga that relates to children and our legacy. So we see that although it may be difficult in the Rashi to create these Jupiter manifestations, the real things, it might be difficult because of the Rashi. But if the person is able to, in this case, that legacy will be exalted, so it's in its happiest place. So it's an interesting combination, and I think a good description of where Invictus Games fit in, that not an easy thing to create, something that's taken time, but something really worthwhile and creates a legacy that is so valuable for so many people. Now, Jupiter shares a mutual agenda with the 3rd house around games and around optimism. The Invictus Games demonstrate how Jupiter has influenced Harry in his 3rd house. Jupiter itself is debilitated, just like the soldiers in these games. And that debilitation is taking place in Harry's 1st house of the body. The 1st house in this chart is ruled by Saturn, which is an indicator of disability and lameness. And Harry has brought the best of these qualities together to create, which is a Jupiter indicator, right? Creation, creating something, a long-term legacy. And we talked about the exaltation of Jupiter in the D7 for wounded service personnel. And that's Saturn's a great indicator for those of us who are wounded, but also in a way, I guess for wounded service personnel, because they're maybe the discarded of the military. Bringing hope, which is a Jupiter quality, to loss, which is a Saturn ruled indicator. So we can see how he's woven all of those things together and really taken this, what may be considered on paper a very difficult combination of indicators, a debilitated planet, 3rd in the 1st, in a Saturn house, with all of those things against it, like we talked about. But hasn't he done a great job? And this is what all charts are like this, and why I love researching charts, because if we can use our resourcefulness, our creativity, and keep our hearts open to experience what is there in our chart and not shy away from it, what a gift we can share. So well done. Now let's look at a couple of the yogas that are going on. One is, of course, for all Capricorn ascendants, Jupiter is ruling the 3rd house and the 12th house. So if you're watching this and you are a Capricorn ascendant, how do you find that combination of the same planet ruling your peers and friends as ruling your house of loss? Do you find that you because it's Jupiter, you have a real connection with your friends and you have a lot of friends. But do you feel that there's a private space, a 12th house space that you keep away from your friends? Is it your friends who are there for you in your private space? Do you feel let down by your friends? Do you have to go it alone because as Jupiter is ruling both of them, it can't help associate friends and being let down and the loss of that. So let me know how you experience the third house, 12th house combination. In this case, we can see how there's confluence there already for the things that we've spoken about because it's brothers in arms and the 12th house of losses. These people have lost so much. It feels like at the time when these things happen. So another confluence of working with wounded surface personnel. Now, another yoga that's taking place in the chart is having the third lord in the first house. It's a Bhava yoga. So that connects courage, teammates, and adventures with a person's life path. And Prince Harry has traveled extensively through his life, enjoying adventures as a working royal, a service person, and a private citizen. And again, what you find when you research that, if you click the hyperlink, this is the article, and I'm not going to read the article to you, but just look at the photos here as someone with their third lord in the first house. And interestingly, actually, they're all difficult, aren't they? These are difficult environments, difficult challenges, but this person is thriving on that adventure and that struggle, that adversity of the third lord being in the first house. So yeah, this is how we see our astrology playing out. It is typical that as Jupiter is the planet that we're speaking about, it's abundant in providing these opportunities. And he's also excelled in team sports such as rugby and polo, rather than, say, individual sports like maybe tennis or something where it's you against the world or the ball. With this third, of course, it wants to bring in the teammates. And he joined the military where his life path could express the courage and peer-to-peer relationships that are difficult to experience as a prince. It's naturally an isolated type of experience or one with very few peers. But we have to acknowledge that given the annihilation of the house, the achievement of personal ambition, which is another thing represented by the third house, those egoic goals that we want, that has been difficult for Prince Harry. And this creates personal frustration and makes the prince restless and impatient. And we see that already, and I'll show you the articles. I think if you read about his life, you can feel comfortable with these descriptions: frustration, restless, impatient. But I think we should acknowledge that Jupiter is such a benefic planet that I think we see only a little of that. If it was a different planet in this combination, that frustration, I'm sure, could have been much bigger. So considering how blocked, how annihilated this house is, the level of frustration we see, I think, is actually quite low. But this dynamic of the third house being annihilated and blocked explains Harry's recent exit from the royal family. And if you click on these links, we've got, sorry, this is the wrong way around. So this would be the first link. Frustrated Prince Harry wanted to quit the royal family more than wife Meghan. And you can see here, they're even using that word frustrated. How does one change a situation like the one he's in when it's in contrast to your own personal ambitions? Challenging. And then the other article, if you clicked on that link, is Prince Harry wanted to move away from the royal family long before he met Meghan Markle. So we can see in the dynamic here that maybe it's easy to blame a new wife or a foreign wife or someone from outside the royal family as the reason why that came to be. But looking at the astrology, it appears to be the case that that dynamic is well and truly in the chart. and coming from the person themselves. That's not to say that the support provided by that marriage hasn't helped bring this to a head or give the courage to take action. But we cannot deny that the third Lord in the first house, where it's annihilated, receiving these malefic Rashi aspects, Lord not aspecting his own house, it's going to be difficult. The person's going to feel frustrated, and here they are having taken action. And perhaps, as we said, if it was a different planet, maybe that rupture would have happened more violently and much earlier. So given the state of the house, the Lord, this yoga means one's personal ambitions are competing with one's life path for the very limited resources available, which is, 1 point of prosperity, so extremely limited. And eventually something's got to give. So here's a run through of and analyzing a chart by house, the third house in this case. Let's just give you one final look at Prince Harry's chart. Let me share that screen again. Oops, of course, now I cannot find Prince Harry's chart. Here you go. So that you can see those dynamics. Third Lord debilitated in the first house. Remember those amazing images of that young man in so many adventurous and adverse settings. I think that's a great example of third Lord in the first house. And also this frustration. What does Jupiter frustration look like? And how does Jupiter achieve its personal ambitions, ruling the 3rd and the 12th? It's the power of that combination is hidden or is leaking into that 12th house. So quite a challenging setup, but I have to say he's done a great job. What an amazing thing to do with that combination of planets and sign. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your experience is if you're a Capricorn ascendant of your 3rd house. And obviously that's going to be your own unique Jupiter that might be in a very different situation. And may have other planets in that 3rd house too, which we didn't have in this case. All right, I hope that you are enjoying analyzing a chart by house. And if you want to learn how to read a chart like this, the whole apprenticeship program, the whole Asheville Vedic Astrology apprenticeship program is now on Teachable. You can access it. I'll put a link in the description below. You can access it. It comes into your inbox every 8 days. And now that we've graduated, you can also, if you wish, choose to have some tutoring with myself or one of the other graduates, have some of your assessments marked if you want that kind of challenge of completing each unit and having your work assessed. So keep in mind, if this is the kind of seeing this technical approach to astrology, some of the preservations of these ancient techniques that have woven their way through so many astrologies through the Mediterranean and the East and the West. And here's Vedic astrology, a continuing, ongoing practice, keeping those alive. All right, I look forward to seeing you in the next video when we'll be looking at the 4th house, again, moving away from that Saturn world that we've been hanging around in. Okay, see you next video. Bye.